Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome to my channel Cracking IELTS 9.0. So today I'll be discussing the Cambridge 15 Test 3 Reading Passage 3 of the Academic Reading module. As you can see, the heading says, why fairy tales are really scary tales. So when I done this passage, I felt this is quite challenging and interesting passage to do. I hope you guys feel the same. So let's not waste much time and jump into the passage. So these are the first set of questions, that is sentence completion. We need to match these sentences by reading the paragraphs. Okay? So let's not waste much time and catch this. What is 27? In fairy tales, details of the plot dash. So we need to complete this sentence with logical meaning according to the paragraph, right? So let's jump into the passage now. Right. People of every culture tell each other fairy tales, but the same story often takes a variety of forms in different parts of the world. Okay. Always read the first and last sentences carefully in matching, because most of the times they may carry the answer, right? In the story of Little Red Riding Hood that European children are familiar with, a young girl on the way to see her grandmother meets a wolf and tells him where she is going. The wolf runs on ahead and disposes of the grandmother, then gets into bed dressed in the grandmother's clothes to wait for the Little Red Riding Hood. You may think you know the story, but which version? In some versions, the wolf swallows up the grandmother, while in others, it locks her in a cupboard. In some stories, Red Riding Hood gets the better of the wolf on her own, while in others, a hunter or a woodcutter hears her cries and comes to her rescue. Okay, so in this paragraph, he's talking about the same story but with different versions all around the world, right? So each part of the world may have a different version, but the story originated, but the story is the same, that is of the Little Red Riding Hood, right? Let's look at the options now. So in fairy tales, the details of the plot may be provided through methods used in biological research. No, we didn't read anything about biological research here, right? Or the reason for their survival. No, we didn't talk about any survival techniques here, right? Then, show considerable global variation. Wow, we have surely read about the global variation, right? So the same story may have different versions all around the globe. That's what we read about, right? I'll show you one more technique here. Read the first sentence carefully, guys. People of every culture tell each other fairy tales, but the same story often takes a variety of forms in different parts of the world. So variety of forms means details of the plot. Different parts of the world means global variation. Considerable global variation, different parts of the world, right? So what do you think is the answer now? Yes, you are right. C. 27 should be clearly C. Okay. Tehrani rejects the idea that the useful lessons for life in fairy tales. So Tehrani is some author maybe, rejects the idea. So he has rejected some idea that useful lessons for life in fairy tales. Let's read the next paragraph and try to understand this. So where is this guy, Tehrani? He is in the next paragraph, right? So here, Jamie Tehrani, the Durham University. Let's read this paragraph now. The universal appeal of these tales is frequently attributed to the idea that they contain cautionary messages. In case of the Little Red Riding Hood, to listen to your mother and avoid talking to strangers. It might be what we find interesting about this story is that it's got this survival relevant information in it, says anthropologist Jamie Tehrani at Durham University in the UK. But his research suggests otherwise. Wow. We have this huge gap in our knowledge about the history and prehistory of storytelling, despite the fact that we know this genre is an incredibly ancient one, he says. That hasn't stopped anthropologists, folklorists, and other academics devising theories to explain the importance of fairy tales in human society. Now, Tehrani has found a way to test these ideas, borrowing a technique from evolutionary biologists. So here he's talking about some survival information, right? See, it might be what we find interesting about this story is that it's got this survival relevant information in it. So this is interesting about the story, but his research suggests otherwise. So here he is contradicting, right? So here he is rejecting the idea now. Right, what interesting about this story is that it's got this survival relevant information in it. So which option is matching clearly, guys? Maybe provided through methods in biological research. No, he didn't talk about any biological research. Or the reason for the survival. Oh, for sure we have read about the survival techniques, right? So Tehrani rejects the idea that the useful lessons for life in fairy tales are the reason for their survival. Yes, B is clearly matching with 28. I'll show you again. See, the idea they contain cautionary messages means useful lessons for life. Cautionary messages means useful lessons for life. Clearly. Then so what is interesting about this story is that this survival relevant information in it means this is the reason for their survival. But Tehrani rejects this idea, but his research suggests otherwise. It means that he is rejecting this idea, right? Because we have a huge gap. We have a huge gap in the knowledge and in the history and prehistory of storytelling, right? So 28 is clearly B. Next one, various theories about the social significance of fairy tales. So he's talking about various theories about the social significance of fairy tales. So let's look for these keywords in the passage now. We have this huge gap in our knowledge about the history and prehistory of storytelling, despite the fact that we know this genre is an incredibly ancient one. It is quite ancient, quite old. That hasn't stopped anthropologists, folklorists, and other academics devising theories. So a theories to explain the importance of the fairy tales in human society. Wow, now human society stands for social significance. Importance of fairy tales means social significance of fairy tales. Various theories means all these theories. See, devising theories to explain. Now, what do you think is the answer? See here. Despite the fact that we know this genre is an incredibly ancient one. Ancient means it's a very old one. Okay, very old one. It's not modern. It's not fact based. It is without factual basis. It's an incredibly ancient one. So what do you think is the answer? Various theories about the social significance of fairy tales means human society. So have been developed without factual basis. Yes, without factual basis means ancient ones, right? Ancient ones were developed without any factual basis. So this option F is clearly matching with 29, right guys? So 29 should be F, okay? I hope I am clear, guys. Please comment in the comment section if you have any kind of doubts. I will be more than happy to clear your doubts. Next one, insights into the development of fairy tales. So here the keywords are insights development of fairy tales, right? To work out the evolutionary history, development, and relationships among groups of organisms, biologists compare the characteristics of living species in a process called phylogenetic analysis. Tehrani has used the same approach to compare relative versions of fairy tales to discover how they have evolved and which elements have survived longest. Wow. So evolved means developed, that he gave in the question, right? Related versions of fairy tales. Versions can be insights, okay? So insights into development of fairy tales. What does it say? See, to work out the evolutionary history among groups of organisms, biologists compare the characteristics of living species through this analysis. Okay, so Tehrani is following the same approach to compare the versions of fairy tales. Now he is taking the idea from the biologist, right? So this can be taken from the biological research. Wow, see. So look at the first option, may be provided through methods used in biological research. Yes, he took ideas from the biological research itself. So A should be the right answer. Okay, I can explain you again, guys. See, to work out the evolution history, development, and relationship, so biologists compare the characteristics of living species in a process called phylogenetic analysis, right? So Tehrani also took the same idea from the biologist, because from that research he can compare the different versions of the fairy tales, right? How they evolved means how they developed. So our answer should be A, right? So 30th one clearly matches with A. Okay, so the next one, all the fairy tales analyzed by Tehrani. So all the fairy tales analyzed by Tehrani, what do? Let's read the next paragraph. Tehrani's analysis focused on Little Red Riding Hood in its many forms, which include another Western fairy tale known as The Wolf and the Kids. Checking for variants of these two tales and similar stories from Africa, East Asia, and other regions, he ended up with 58 stories recorded from oral traditions. Wow, once his phylogenetic analysis had established that they were indeed related, he used the same methods to explore how they have developed and altered over time. So, what did he do? He focused on only one story and all of its versions, right? So, what is the result in the end? He ended up with 58 stories recorded from oral traditions. What do you mean by oral? What is the meaning of oral? Spoken, right? Of course, they are spoken. So all the stories, all the fairy tales analyzed by Tehrani were originally spoken rather than written. E. So the answer is E here. Okay, guys. You can check the passage. The answer is here. He ended up with 58 stories recorded from oral traditions. It means they were spoken stories rather than written. Correct? So let's move to the next set of questions now. So here we have the fill-ups, but with a list. Okay. So let's read now. Tehrani used techniques from evolutionary biology to find out if dash existed among 58 stories from around the world. Okay. We have just read this, right? We have just read this. What does it say? So he ended up with 58 stories, oral traditions. Once this phylogenetic analysis had established that they were indeed related, he used the same methods to explore how they have developed and altered over time. Wow, I think we got our answer. Tehrani used techniques from evolutionary biology to find out if dash existed among the stories from around the world. What existed? Here, had established means existed, right? analysis had established that they have indeed related. So there should be some relation between the stories, related. Okay. So is there a word called related in the options? No, we cannot see any word called related. But what is the synonym? Links, right? So we should write the option D here, right? So to find out if links existed between among 58 stories from around the world, whether these stories are related or not, means they are linked or not. So links is the right answer, guys. Next one. He also wanted to know which aspects of the story had fewest dash. Fewest is one of the key important keyword now. He also wanted to know something about the stories which had fewest dash. First, he tested some assumptions about which aspects of the story alter least as it evolves, indicating their importance. Wow. Here is a word called least. Least means fewest. Okay. First, he tested some assumptions about which aspects of the story alter. Altering means changing, right? Changing, modifying, varying. So, alter least as it evolves, indicating their importance. So, this indicates their importance as well. See, read here further, had fewest dash as he believed these aspects would be most important ones. So, indicating their importance. So fewest, alter. Altering means changing, modifying, varying. So variations, right? So F clearly matches here. Altering means variations. Let's read further. Contrary to other beliefs, he found that some dash that were included in a story tended to change over time, and that the middle of a story seemed no more important than other parts. Okay, so he's talking about other beliefs now. Folklorists believe that what happens in a story is more central to the story than the characters in it. That visiting a relative only to be met by a scary animal in disguise. So, folklorists believe means others believe. This is the belief by others. Contrary to others, the question says. More fundamental than whether the visitor is a little girl or three siblings or the animal is a tiger or a wolf. However, Tehrani found no significant difference in the rate of evolution of incidents compared with that of the characters. Certain episodes are very stable because they are crucial to the story, but there are lots of other details that can evolve quite freely, he says. Neither did his analysis support the theory that the central section of a story is the most conserved part. He found no significant difference in the flexibility of events there compared with the beginning or the end. Wow. So he's talking about the central idea, that is the evolution of incidents or the events. Okay, so these are the types of words we are looking for. Folklorist means the others believe. Okay. Folklorists believe means others believe. They believe that what happens in a story. So in the last paragraph we read, what happens in a story is more central to the story than the characters in it. So what happens in the story, the incidents or the events, they are more important. That's what is said here, right? So here we have the words. There is no significant difference in the rate of evolution of incidents compared to that of the character, Tehrani says. So he opposed the idea. So difference in the flexibility of events, they are compared with the beginning or the end. So what do you think is the answer? Contrary to others' beliefs, means folklorist beliefs, he found that some incidents or events, do we have any word like that? Yes, we have events here. Events that are included in a story tend to change over time, and that the middle of story seems no more important than the other parts. So 34 is clearly B. Okay, I hope you are following me, guys. Let's move to the next question. He was also surprised that parts of a story which seemed to provide some sort of dash were unimportant. Okay, some parts of a story that used to provide some sort of dash were unimportant, he says. Now, what is that? Let's read further. But the real big surprise came when he looked at the cautionary elements of the story. Studies on hunter-gatherer folk tales suggest that these narratives include really important information about the environment and the possible dangers that may be faced there. Stuff that's relevant to survival, he says. Yet in his analysis, such elements were just as flexible as seemingly trivial details. What then is important enough to be reproduced from generation to generation? So he was also surprised, means the real big surprise came. That parts of a story which seem to provide some sort of dash, they used to provide some sort of cautionary elements of the story. Cautionary elements. Elements means some part of the story, right? Parts of the story. Elements of the story means parts of the story. They provide cautionary methods. Cautionary elements. So what do you mean by caution here? Is there any synonym for caution? Can you see this? Yes, it is warning. Caution means warning. So 35 should be C. Okay. Next, the aspect that he found most important in a story's survival was dash. What is the most important aspect he found in a story's survival? Let's find out, guys. So, yet in his analysis, such elements were just as flexible as trivial details. What is important enough to be reproduced from generation to generation? So there is a question mark here, guys. Okay, what is important enough means he's going to tell what is important. The answer, it would appear, is fear. So the answer is fear. Bloodthirsty and gruesome aspects of the story, such as the eating of the grandmother by the wolf, turned out to be the best preserved of all. Wow. So what is the most important factor in a story survival? Here he gave, in this sentence he gave the question. Here is the answer in the next paragraph. The answer is fear. So what's the synonym for fear? Can you see this? You are right. It's horror. G. So 36 should be G. Okay. So let's move to the next set of questions now. So what method did Jamie Tehrani use to test his ideas about fairy tales? What are the keywords? What method did he use to test his ideas? So he compared oral and written forms of the same stories? No. He looked at many different forms of the same basic story? Yes. This can be the answer. So let's keep it on hold, because the same basic story, Red Riding Hood, but it had various versions all over the world, right? So he looked at many different forms of the same basic story. He looked at unrelated stories from many different countries? No. He contrasted the development of fairy tales with that of living creatures? Not at all. So let's look at the passage once again. Paragraph, guys. Tehrani's analysis focused on Little Red Riding Hood in its many forms, which include another Western fairy tale, The Wolf and the Kids, checking for variants of these two tales and similar stories from Africa, East Asia and other regions. So what is the method did he adopt? He is checking the same story but with many different forms, right? See, he took the story, but the similar stories he took from Africa, East Asia, other regions. He got 58 stories, like recorded oral traditions, right? So basically he's checking the same story with different versions. That's it. So the answer for 37 is clearly option B. Okay, so let's move to the next question. When discussing Tehrani's views, Jack Zipes suggests that. So where is this guy, Jack? Wow, here is this guy. Jack Zipes at the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis, is unconvinced by Tehrani's views on fairy tales. Okay, so he's opposing, he's unconvinced. Even if they are gruesome, they won't stick unless they matter, he says. He believes the perennial theme of women as victims in stories like Little Red Riding Hood explains why they continue to feel relevant. But Tehrani points out that although this is often the case in Western versions, it is not always true elsewhere. In Chinese and Japanese versions, often known as the tiger grandmother, the villain is a woman, and in both Iran and Nigeria, the victim is a boy. Wow, so what does now Jack say? So he's opposing, he's unconvinced with his view, and he says that even they are gruesome, they won't stick on they unless they matter. Means the perennial theme of women means everlasting. So every time women are shown as victims, right? In stories like this, explains why they continue to feel relevant. So this is the main reason he says. So let's check the options. Tehrani ignores key changes in the role of women. Okay, now let's keep it on hold. Stories which are too horrific are not always taken seriously. No, not at all. Tehrani overemphasizes the importance of violence in stories. No, he didn't talk about that. Features of stories only survive if they have a deeper significance. Wow. Only survive and deeper significance. Note these two words, okay? What do you mean by deeper significance? Continue to feel relevant. Perennial theme of woman. Perennial theme means everlasting theme. He believes the perennial theme of a woman as a victim. So always showing women as a victim in stories. So explains why they continue to feel relevant. That's the reason why they feel relevant. Okay, so these kind of stories can only survive if they have a deeper significance. Means the perennial theme of showing women as victims, and that is why they continue to feel relevant. So this is the deeper significance. Okay, so D is the right answer for 38. Okay guys, so let's move to the next one. Why does Tehrani refer to Chinese and Japanese fairy tales? See, let's look at this sentence. But Tehrani points out that although this is often the case in Western versions, it is not always true elsewhere. Okay, it is not always true elsewhere. In Chinese and Japanese versions, often known as the tiger grandmother, the villain is a woman, and in both Iran and Nigeria, the victim is a boy. So Tehrani wants to oppose this guy Jack. So he says that although this is the case in the Western version, it is not always true elsewhere. He wants to show that it is not true in China and Japan. So he wants to oppose him. That's what is happening here. To indicate that Jack Zive's theory is incorrect? Yes, of course, he wants to show that it is incorrect. This is matching now. Let's look at the other options as well. To suggest that crime is a global problem? No. To imply that fairy tales have a similar meaning? No, it doesn't match. To add more evidence to Jack Zive's ideas? No, this is not the case. So A is the best option because he says he wants to prove that Jack's theory is incorrect, right? So A is the right option for 39. Next, let's move to number 40, the last one. Come on guys. What does Matthias Classen believe about fairy tales? So there's one more guy called Classen. Let's read about him. So Matthias Classen at Aarhus University in Denmark isn't surprised by Tehrani's findings. Habits and morals change, but the things that scare us and the fact that we seek out entertainment that's designed to scare us, those are constant. He says, Classen believes that scary stories teach us what it feels like to be afraid without having to experience the real danger, and so build up resistance to negative emotions. Wow. So he says, so let's read the last sentence carefully, guys. He believes that scary stories teach us what it feels like to be afraid without having experienced the real danger. Okay. So they are a safe way of learning to deal with fear. Yes, they are a safe way because it is not reality, it is just imagination and a story. So let's keep this option on hold. There are type of entertainment that people avoid. Now, they reflect the changing values of our society. No, nothing is mentioned about that. They reduce our ability to deal with real world problems. Not at all. They increase the ability, he says, right? So A is most suitable option. 40 is A. I can tell you again, because so teachers what it feels like to be afraid without having to experience the real danger. So build up the resistance to negative emotions. So we can build up our resistance, we can imagine how it feels to be in scary situations. That's what the author is trying to say, and hence A is the right option for 40th one. Right, so that is the end of today's video, guys. I hope you guys are following me. Please comment in the comment section if you have any types of doubts. I'll be more than happy to clarify them. Please do not forget to like, share and subscribe my video. This video is really helpful for IELTS aspirants. If you can follow my tips and tricks, I am sure that you can score more than 8 bands in the reading module. So until next time, goodbye, have a great day.